Detective Sarah Mitchell pulled her unmarked sedan into the coffee shop parking lot, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the asphalt. She had been working undercover for 3 months now, and the weight of maintaining her civilian cover was beginning to wear on her. The drug trafficking case she was investigating had led her deep into the local community, where she posed as a freelance graphic designer who worked from various coffee shops around the city. She stepped out of her car, smoothing down her casual jeans and oversized sweater. Her badge remained hidden beneath layers of clothing, secured in a concealed holster that had become second nature to wear. The transformation from Detective Mitchell to Sarah the designer required more than just a change of clothes. She had to become someone entirely different, someone who would blend seamlessly into the world of young professionals and students who frequented these establishments. The bell above the door chimed as she entered Brew and Bean, her regular spot for the past 2 weeks. The familiar aroma of freshly ground coffee beans and baked pastries filled her senses. She had chosen this particular location because it sat at the intersection of 3 neighborhoods where her suspects were known to operate. From her usual table by the window, she could observe the foot traffic and potentially spot any of the individuals on her watch list. "Good morning, Sarah," called out Maya, the enthusiastic barista who had memorized her order after just a few visits. "The usual?" Sarah smiled and nodded, appreciating how easily she had slipped into this routine. "You know it. Large coffee, extra shot, and one of those blueberry muffins if you have any left." As Maya prepared her order, Sarah scanned the morning crowd. Commuters grabbed quick coffee fixes before heading to their offices. Students huddled over laptops with textbooks scattered across their tables, and a few early retirees read newspapers while enjoying leisurely breakfasts. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but she had learned that in undercover work, normalcy could be deceiving. She settled into her corner table, opening her laptop to maintain her cover. The screen displayed actual graphic design projects she had been working on during her downtime. The department had insisted that her cover needed to be authentic, so she had taken several online courses and even completed a few small jobs for local businesses. The irony was not lost on her that she was actually becoming quite skilled at something she had never intended to learn. 30 minutes into her surveillance, the coffee shop door opened again. This time, a man in military fatigues entered, his posture immediately catching Sarah's attention. Even in her civilian disguise, her detective instincts remained sharp. The man moved with the precise, measured steps of someone accustomed to discipline and order. His eyes swept the room methodically before he approached the counter. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez had just returned from his morning physical training session at the nearby military base. His deployment to Afghanistan had ended 6 months ago, and he was still adjusting to the routine of stateside duty. The nightmares had mostly stopped, but the hypervigilance remained. He found himself constantly assessing his surroundings, looking for potential threats even in the most mundane situations. The coffee shop had become part of his new routine. After PT, he would stop by for breakfast before reporting to his office on base. The familiar environment helped him feel more connected to civilian life, something his counselor had recommended as part of his reintegration process. He ordered black coffee and a breakfast sandwich, then looked around for an empty table. The place was busier than usual this morning. His eyes fell on the young woman in the corner, typing intently on her laptop. She appeared to be alone, and there was an empty chair at her table. He hesitated for a moment, not wanting to intrude, but options were limited. Sarah noticed the soldier approaching her table from the corner of her eye. She had observed him during his brief interaction with the barista, noting his polite but reserved demeanor. Something about his careful movements and the way he held his shoulders suggested recent combat experience. Her father had been a Vietnam veteran, and she recognized the subtle signs of someone still adjusting to life away from a war zone. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice polite but slightly uncertain. "Would you mind if I shared your table? Everywhere else seems to be taken." Sarah looked up from her laptop screen, offering a friendly smile. "Of course, please sit down. I'm Sarah." "Marcus," he replied, settling into the chair across from her. "Thanks for this. I appreciate it." "No problem at all. I'm here most mornings anyway, so I know how crowded it can get." Marcus nodded and began eating his breakfast in silence. Sarah continued typing on her laptop, occasionally glancing up to observe the street outside. To anyone watching, they appeared to be two strangers sharing a table out of necessity, nothing more. However, Sarah found herself genuinely curious about the man sitting across from her. There was something compelling about his quiet intensity, the way he seemed simultaneously relaxed and alert. She had encountered many military personnel in her line of work, both as victims and witnesses, and she had developed a deep respect for their service and sacrifice. "Are you stationed locally?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Marcus looked up from his sandwich, somewhat surprised by the question. Most civilians either ignored him completely or thanked him for his service in that awkward way that made him uncomfortable. Sarah's inquiry seemed genuinely interested rather than obligatory. "Yes, at Fort Harrison. I've been back stateside for about 6 months now." "Deployment?" "Afghanistan. 15 months. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. That must be quite an adjustment, coming back to all this. She gestured around the coffee shop, encompassing the casual atmosphere and everyday concerns of the other patrons. Marcus was struck by her understanding. Most people either avoided the topic entirely or asked inappropriate questions about combat. Sarah's acknowledgement was simple and respectful. "It is different," he admitted. "Everything moves at a different pace here. Takes some getting used to." "I imagine it would. My father served in Vietnam, and he used to talk about how strange it felt to come back to a world where people worried about things like traffic jams and what to have for lunch." This revelation created an unexpected connection between them. Marcus felt some of his usual guardedness begin to relax. "Your father sounds like a wise man. Did he adjust okay?" Sarah's expression grew slightly more serious. "Eventually. It took time, and he had to work at it. But he found his place again." They continued talking as they finished their breakfast, the conversation flowing more easily than either had expected. Sarah found herself drawn to Marcus's thoughtful responses and the glimpses of humor that occasionally broke through his serious demeanor. Marcus, meanwhile, was refreshed by Sarah's genuine interest and lack of judgment. What neither of them realized was that they were both maintaining carefully constructed facades. Sarah saw Marcus as a dedicated soldier adjusting to civilian life, while Marcus viewed Sarah as a creative professional with no connection to law enforcement or military affairs. The assumption felt natural and comfortable for both of them. As the morning crowd began to thin out, Sarah glanced at her watch. She had been there for over an hour and needed to maintain her surveillance schedule. "I should probably get going," she said, closing her laptop. "I have a client meeting this afternoon, and I still have some work to finish." Marcus nodded, feeling slightly disappointed that their conversation was ending. "Of course. Maybe I'll see you here again sometime." "I'm here most mornings around this time," Sarah said, gathering her things. "It was really nice talking with you, Marcus." "You too, Sarah. Have a good day." As Sarah walked toward the door, Marcus watched her go, struck by how natural their interaction had felt. He couldn't remember the last time he had talked with someone outside of his military circle without feeling the need to explain or defend his experiences. Sarah had simply accepted what he shared without trying to dig deeper or offer unsolicited advice. Sarah, meanwhile, found herself thinking about Marcus as she walked to her car. There was something about his quiet strength that she found appealing, though she couldn't quite define what it was. She had met plenty of military personnel through her work, but none had left quite the same impression. Over the following weeks, their morning encounters became a regular occurrence. Sometimes they shared a table and talked. Other times they simply nodded to each other across the crowded coffee shop. Marcus looked forward to these brief interactions, finding them a bright spot in his routine. Sarah began to appreciate having someone to talk to who had no knowledge of her real job or the stress that came with it. Their conversations gradually became more personal. Marcus shared stories about his childhood in Texas and his decision to join the military after college. Sarah talked about her supposed graphic design work and her love of hiking in the local mountains. Both carefully edited their stories, omitting the parts that would reveal their true professions. Marcus began to see Sarah as a refreshing change from his usual interactions. Here was someone who treated him as simply Marcus, not as Sergeant Rodriguez or as a veteran carrying invisible wounds. She asked thoughtful questions about his interests and opinions rather than focusing on his military service. When he mentioned that he was taking evening classes in business administration, she encouraged him to pursue his goals and shared resources she had found helpful for online learning. Sarah, for her part, found herself genuinely caring about Marcus's well-being. She noticed on days when he seemed more withdrawn or tired, and she had learned to recognize the signs that indicated he had experienced a difficult night. Without being intrusive, she found ways to steer their conversations toward lighter topics on those mornings, offering him a moment of normalcy in what she suspected was often a challenging adjustment process. The irony of their situation would have been amusing if either of them had been aware of it. Here were two people who spent their professional lives in high-stress, potentially dangerous situations, finding solace in what they believed was a simple friendship with a civilian who lived in a completely different world. Marcus's assumption that Sarah was merely a civilian became the foundation of how he related to her. In his mind, she represented everything he was working to reconnect with about normal life. She was someone who worried about deadlines and client presentations rather than life and death decisions. Someone who could enjoy a simple conversation without analyzing every word for tactical significance. Someone who embodied the peaceful world he had fought to protect. Sarah's ability to maintain her cover so completely was both a testament to her professionalism and a reflection of how much she valued these moments of connection with Marcus. For 30 or 40 minutes each morning, she could set aside the weight of her investigation and the constant vigilance required for undercover work. She could simply be Sarah, talking with Marcus about books, movies, local events, and the small details of daily life that made up normal human interaction. Neither of them questioned the other's story too deeply. Marcus accepted Sarah's explanation of her work as a graphic designer because it fit with his perception of her as a creative, independent person. Sarah believed Marcus's descriptions of his military routine and adjustment to stateside duty because they aligned with her understanding of post-deployment experiences. Their friendship developed within the safe boundaries of these assumptions. Marcus felt comfortable sharing his struggles with readjustment because he believed Sarah had no professional obligation to analyze or report on what he said. Sarah found herself more relaxed in Marcus's presence because she assumed he had no connection to the criminal world she was investigating. As weeks turned into a month, then 2 months, their morning conversations became the highlight of both their days. They had established an easy rapport that felt both comfortable and energizing. Marcus began to look forward to seeing Sarah smile when he entered the coffee shop. Sarah found herself arriving a few minutes earlier each day, hoping to secure their usual table by the window. The coffee shop staff had begun to notice their regular interaction. Maya, the friendly barista, started preparing both their orders when she saw either of them approaching. Other regular customers had observed their growing friendship with the casual interest that people have in the small dramas playing out around them. What none of them could have predicted was how dramatically this carefully maintained balance would shift. Both Marcus and Sarah had become skilled at compartmentalizing their professional and personal lives, but the nature of their real work meant that these separate worlds were bound to collide eventually. The investigation Sarah was working on was reaching a critical phase. Her suspects had become more active, and intelligence suggested that a major drug shipment was planned for some time in the coming week. She had identified several key players and was close to gathering enough evidence to make arrests. The pressure from her superiors was increasing daily, and she knew that her undercover role would soon come to an end. Marcus, meanwhile, was dealing with his own professional challenges. His unit was preparing for a new deployment, though the destination and timeline remained classified. The prospect of another overseas assignment was causing him considerable anxiety, particularly given how much progress he felt he had made in his adjustment to stateside life. His conversations with Sarah had become an important part of his mental health routine, providing him with a connection to civilian normalcy that he valued deeply. Neither of them realized that the assumptions they had made about each other were about to be dramatically challenged. The careful boundaries they had maintained between their professional and personal lives were about to collapse in a way that would force them to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about each other. The morning that would change everything started like any other. Sarah arrived at the coffee shop at her usual time, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, ready to begin another day of surveillance disguised as freelance work. Marcus completed his PT session and headed to Brew and Bean for breakfast before reporting to base. Both of them were looking forward to their daily conversation, unaware that forces beyond their control were about to reveal the truth about who they really were. The morning sun streamed through the coffee shop windows as Sarah settled into her usual corner table, her laptop already open to a half-finished logo design that served as perfect cover for her real work. She had arrived earlier than usual because her surveillance team had received intelligence about increased activity from their targets. Today could be the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Marcus entered Brew and Bean exactly on schedule, his internal clocks still governed by military precision despite months of civilian readjustment. He spotted Sarah immediately and felt the familiar lift in his mood that had become part of his morning routine. Their friendship had evolved into something he valued deeply, though he was careful not to analyze it too closely. "Morning, Sarah," he said, approaching her table with his coffee and breakfast sandwich. "Mind if I join you?" "Of course," she replied, closing a design file to make room for conversation. "How was PT today?" "Challenging. Our new lieutenant is trying to prove himself by pushing everyone harder than necessary." Marcus sat down across from her, noting that she seemed more alert than usual. "How's the design project coming along?" Sarah glanced at her laptop screen where a corporate logo mock-up was displayed. "Getting there. The client keeps changing their mind about the color scheme, so I'm basically starting over for the third time this week." What she didn't mention was that her earpiece had been crackling with updates from her surveillance team all morning. 3 of their primary suspects had been spotted in the area, and Detective Johnson, her partner, was positioned across the street monitoring vehicle traffic. The drug transaction they had been tracking for months was likely to happen today. Marcus sympathized with her supposed client troubles while dealing with his own internal struggle. His unit had received preliminary deployment orders the day before, and he was wrestling with whether to tell Sarah about the possibility of leaving. Their friendship had become more important to him than he had initially realized, and the thought of cutting off this connection to civilian normalcy was troubling. "You seem a little distracted today," Sarah observed, genuinely concerned about the slight tension she detected in his voice. "Just work stuff. Nothing too serious." Marcus took a sip of his coffee, debating how much he could share without getting into classified territory. "We might have some changes coming up in our schedule, that's all." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down and felt her pulse quicken. The message was from Johnson, target vehicle approaching. Blue sedan, license plate matches. Suspect 1 in passenger seat. She forced herself to maintain casual body language while her mind shifted into full alert mode. "Excuse me for just a second," she said to Marcus, typing a quick response to confirm she had received the message. Marcus noticed her sudden focus on the phone, but attributed it to work-related stress. Freelancers often dealt with demanding clients who expected immediate responses to messages and emails. He had learned to recognize the signs of someone juggling multiple professional obligations. Sarah's earpiece crackled quietly with her partner's voice. "Suspect vehicle has stopped at the building next door. 2 individuals getting out. I need you to maintain visual on the street entrance while I move to the back exit." The building next door housed several small businesses, including a laundromat that intelligence suggested was being used as a front for money laundering operations. Sarah had been monitoring the location for weeks, documenting the patterns of legitimate customers versus suspicious visitors. "I'm going to step outside for a few minutes," Sarah said, beginning to close her laptop. "I need to take a call from this difficult client, and I don't want to disturb anyone in here." Marcus nodded understandingly. "No problem. I'll keep an eye on your stuff." Sarah gathered her phone and stepped out of the coffee shop, positioning herself where she could observe both the street and the entrance to the building next door. Through her earpiece, she could hear Johnson coordinating with backup units that were approaching the area. Inside the coffee shop, Marcus finished his breakfast while keeping an occasional eye on Sarah through the window. She appeared to be engaged in an intense phone conversation, pacing slightly and gesturing with her free hand. He assumed she was dealing with the client, who kept changing their mind about the logo design. What Marcus couldn't hear was Sarah's side of a very different conversation. "Johnson, I have visual on both suspects. They just entered the laundromat carrying a large duffel bag and what appears to be a briefcase." "Copy that." Backup units are 2 minutes out. Keep monitoring and report any additional activity. Understood. There's also a third individual who just arrived on foot. Male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing a red baseball cap and dark jacket. He's approaching the same entrance. Sarah's training kicked in automatically as she continued her surveillance, taking note of vehicle descriptions, license plates, and the timing of each movement. After months of preparation, the pieces were finally coming together. Marcus glanced out the window again and noticed that Sarah's phone conversation seemed quite serious. Her posture had changed, becoming more formal and alert. For a moment, he found himself wondering what kind of graphic design client would require such an intense discussion, but he dismissed the thought. Freelancers dealt with all kinds of demanding customers. Through her earpiece, Sarah heard Johnson's voice again. Additional suspect vehicle approaching from the south. White van with commercial plates. This could be the delivery we've been waiting for. Sarah adjusted her position to get a better view of the approaching vehicle. The white van pulled into the small parking lot behind the building, confirming their intelligence about the location being used for illegal activities. Johnson, the van has stopped at the rear of the building. Driver is getting out along with 2 passengers. They're opening the back doors of the van. Perfect. All units, we have confirmation of the transaction beginning. Prepare to move on my signal. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with the final phase of an operation. After months of careful planning and surveillance, they were about to take down a significant drug trafficking network. Inside the coffee shop, Marcus had finished his coffee and was preparing to leave for his base. He collected his trash and glanced toward the window, expecting to see Sarah still on her phone call. Instead, he was surprised to see her moving with purpose toward the building next door, no longer holding her phone but seemingly focused on something happening there. Curious about her sudden change in behavior, Marcus stepped closer to the window to get a better view. What he saw confused him greatly. Sarah was not approaching the building like someone going to meet a client. Her movement was deliberate and tactical, and she appeared to be coordinating with someone he couldn't see. Then, Marcus noticed something that made him look more carefully. There was a small device in Sarah's ear that definitely wasn't a phone earpiece. Her posture had shifted into something he recognized from his military training, the alert stance of someone conducting surveillance or preparing for tactical action. A white van in the parking lot next door had attracted the attention of several individuals who were moving with the kind of coordination that suggested law enforcement activity. Marcus's combat-trained instincts began to analyze the situation automatically, noting escape routes, potential threats, and the positioning of what were clearly undercover officers. Sarah spoke quietly into a concealed microphone. All suspects are now inside the building. Johnson, are you in position at the back exit? Affirmative. Backup units are surrounding the building. We're ready to execute the arrest warrant. Copy. Moving to secure the front entrance. As Sarah approached the building, she reached inside her jacket and withdrew her service weapon, holding it in a ready position while staying out of sight of the windows. Her months of preparation had led to this moment, and she was focused entirely on the successful completion of the operation. Marcus watched in growing amazement as the woman he had known for months, as Sarah the graphic designer revealed herself to be something entirely different. The casual civilian persona he had been interacting with dissolved before his eyes, replaced by a clearly trained law enforcement professional conducting what appeared to be a major operation. Everything about Sarah's movement and positioning indicated extensive tactical training. She coordinated with invisible team members through hand signals and moved with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. This was not a graphic designer dealing with a difficult client. This was a police officer making arrests. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. Every conversation they had shared, every assumption he had made about her civilian status, every moment when he had valued her as his connection to normal life. All of it was based on a complete misunderstanding of who she actually was. Through the coffee shop window, Marcus continued to watch as several unmarked vehicles converged on the building. Men and women in tactical gear emerged from these vehicles, moving with military precision to surround the structure. Sarah appeared to be one of the lead officers coordinating the operation. Police. Search warrant. The shouted commands were audible even through the coffee shop walls as the arrest team entered the building next door. Other customers in the coffee shop had begun to notice the activity outside. Maya, the barista, stepped closer to the windows to get a better view of what was happening. "Looks like some kind of police raid," she said to no one in particular. Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions as he processed what he was seeing. Confusion dominated initially. How had he been so completely wrong about someone he talked with almost daily? But underneath the confusion was something that might have been hurt. Sarah had allowed him to believe she was someone she wasn't, accepting his assumption without correction. The arrest operation unfolded efficiently over the next 20 minutes. Marcus watched as several individuals were led out of the building in handcuffs, loaded into police vehicles that had appeared as if from nowhere. Sarah remained visible throughout, clearly in a supervisory role, coordinating with other officers and documenting evidence. When the immediate action concluded, Sarah stepped away from the building and pulled out her phone. For a moment, Marcus thought she might be calling him to explain what had happened. Instead, she appeared to be making official reports to superiors or coordinating follow-up activities. It was only then that Sarah remembered she had left Marcus sitting in the coffee shop, watching everything unfold. The realization filled her with a complicated mix of emotions. Her cover had been blown in the most dramatic way possible, in front of the one person whose opinion had somehow become important to her. She looked toward the coffee shop windows and saw Marcus standing there, clearly having observed the entire operation. Even from a distance, she could see the confusion and what might have been betrayal in his expression. The easy friendship they had built over months of morning conversations was about to be tested by the revelation that one of them was not at all who the other had believed. Sarah knew she needed to go back and face Marcus to try to explain why she had allowed him to believe she was a civilian graphic designer when she was actually a detective working undercover. But first, she had to complete her professional responsibilities and help secure the crime scene. Marcus remained at the window, processing what he had witnessed. His mind was working through all their previous conversations, reanalyzing every comment Sarah had made about her work, her schedule, and her life. How much of what she had shared was real, and how much had been part of an elaborate cover story? The woman he had thought of as his anchor to civilian normalcy was revealed to be someone who lived in the same world of tactical operations and potential danger that he inhabited in his military service. The irony was not lost on him. He had been drawn to her precisely because he believed she represented something different from his professional life. As police vehicles began to clear the area and the immediate drama subsided, other coffee shop customers returned to their conversations and morning routines. The excitement of witnessing a real police operation provided material for discussion that would last for days. But Marcus continued to stand at the window, waiting for Sarah to return and explain how everything he thought he knew about her was wrong. He found himself wondering if she had been investigating him, if their friendship was part of some official operation, or if their connection had been genuine despite the deception about her identity. Sarah finished her immediate duties and began walking back toward the coffee shop. She could see Marcus still waiting inside, and she knew that the conversation they were about to have would be unlike any they had shared before. Everything had changed in the space of 30 minutes, and there was no going back to the comfortable assumptions that had defined their relationship. The morning that had started with their usual friendly conversation was about to end with a confrontation that would challenge both of their abilities to separate personal feelings from professional obligations. Sarah approached the coffee shop door, knowing that the man waiting inside had every right to feel deceived and angry about the elaborate fiction she had maintained. Marcus watched her approach, his military training helping him maintain composure despite the emotional turmoil he was experiencing. In a few moments, he would learn whether the friendship he had valued was real or simply another part of Detective Sarah Mitchell's undercover operation. Sarah paused outside the coffee shop door, her hand hesitating on the handle as she gathered her thoughts. Through the window, she could see Marcus still standing where she had left him, his expression unreadable but his posture tense. The successful completion of her months-long investigation should have left her feeling triumphant, but instead she felt a knot of anxiety about the conversation she was about to have. She pushed open the door and walked directly to where Marcus was waiting. The other customers had mostly returned to their morning routines, though a few were still discussing the police activity they had witnessed. Maya, the barista, looked up expectantly, clearly hoping for details about what had happened next door. "We need to talk," Sarah said quietly, meeting Marcus's eyes for the first time since the operation began. Marcus nodded, his voice carefully controlled. "I think that would be a good idea." They returned to their usual table by the window, but the comfortable familiarity of their normal seating arrangement only emphasized how dramatically their relationship had shifted. Sarah sat down across from Marcus, very aware that she was no longer maintaining her graphic designer persona. The badge clipped to her belt was now visible, along with the service weapon she had holstered after securing the scene. "Detective Sarah Mitchell, Metro Police Department," she said, extending her hand in a formal introduction that felt surreal given their months of casual friendship. "I should have told you who I really was." Marcus looked at her outstretched hand for a moment before shaking it. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, United States Army." "I guess we both had our assumptions wrong." The formal introductions created a strange distance between them, as if they were meeting for the first time rather than continuing a relationship that had developed over months of shared conversations. Sarah realized that Marcus had revealed something significant about his military rank, suggesting that he had also been operating under incomplete assumptions about how much she knew about his background. "You're not a graphic designer," Marcus stated, his tone carefully neutral. "No, I'm not. I've been working undercover for the past 3 months, investigating a drug trafficking operation that was using the building next door as a front for money laundering." Sarah paused, watching his face for reaction. "But the person you've been talking to every morning, that part was real." Marcus considered her words carefully. His military training had taught him to compartmentalize information and emotions, but this situation was testing those skills. "How much of what you told me about yourself was true?" "Most of it, actually. I do love hiking in the local mountains. I did grow up here, and my father really was a Vietnam veteran. I genuinely took those online courses to maintain my cover, so I can actually do basic graphic design now." Sarah managed a small smile. "I even completed a few real client projects to make the story convincing. But you've been lying to me for months about who you are and what you do for a living." The blunt statement hung between them like an accusation. Sarah felt the weight of his disappointment, even though she knew her deception had been professionally necessary. "I was maintaining an undercover identity. It wasn't personal deception, Marcus. It was my job." "It felt personal to me," Marcus replied quietly. "I thought I was talking to someone who lived in a completely different world from mine. Someone who represented normal civilian life." Sarah realized the deeper implications of what he was saying. "You mean someone who wasn't involved in law enforcement or military operations? Someone who didn't carry a weapon or make life and death decisions?" "Exactly." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing the revelation. "I valued our conversations because I thought you understood civilian concerns and priorities. I thought you could help me reconnect with that part of life." The irony of their situation was becoming clear to both of them. Marcus had been drawn to Sarah because he believed she represented the peaceful civilian world he was trying to reintegrate into. Sarah had found comfort in their friendship because it allowed her to step away from the stress and vigilance of her undercover work. Both had been seeking something in the other that was based on a fundamental misunderstanding. "What about you?" Sarah asked. "You introduced yourself as Staff Sergeant. I thought you were just a regular soldier going through readjustment issues." Marcus considered how much he should reveal. His military position involved responsibilities that went beyond what he had shared in their casual conversations. "I lead a specialized unit that conducts overseas operations. The readjustment issues you mentioned are real, but my situation is more complex than I let on." Meaning I'm not just a soldier having trouble adapting to stateside duty. I'm a team leader dealing with classified operational stress, and I've been trying to find ways to maintain mental health while preparing for another deployment. Sarah felt a pang of recognition. "So you were also editing your story to fit what you thought I needed to hear." "I suppose I was. I didn't think a civilian would understand the specific challenges of special operations work." They sat in silence for a moment, both grappling with how their assumptions had shaped their entire relationship. The easy conversation that had characterized their friendship felt impossible now, replaced by careful consideration of what was real and what had been performance. Were you investigating me? Marcus asked suddenly. Was our friendship part of some operation? No, Sarah replied quickly, understanding how important her answer was. Absolutely not. I had no idea you were military when we first met, beyond what was obvious from your uniform. Our conversation had nothing to do with my investigation. Marcus studied her face, his military experience giving him some skill at detecting deception. Her response seemed genuine, which provided some relief to his concern that their entire relationship had been fabricated for professional purposes. The people you arrested today, he said, were they dangerous? Very. We've been tracking this organization for over a year. They were responsible for distributing drugs throughout 3 counties, and intelligence suggested they had connections to violent criminal networks. Sarah hesitated before adding, there were weapons involved, and we had reason to believe they wouldn't surrender peacefully if confronted. Marcus absorbed this information with the understanding of someone familiar with tactical operations. So you've been in potential danger this entire time we've been having our morning conversations. It's part of the job. But, yes, there were risks involved. And I never knew. I thought you were worried about client deadlines and logo color schemes. Sarah could hear the frustration in his voice, though she wasn't entirely sure if he was angry about her deception or concerned about dangers she had faced without his knowledge. Would it have mattered if you had known? Marcus considered the question seriously. I don't know. Maybe. I might have been more aware of your surroundings, more alert to potential threats when we were together. You mean you would have gone into protective mode? Possibly. Sarah realized that Marcus's military training had given him instincts similar to her law enforcement background. Both of them were accustomed to assessing threats and taking responsibility for the safety of others. Is that why you didn't tell me about your special operations background? Because you thought I might worry or try to understand problems that civilians shouldn't have to deal with? Partly. Most people don't know how to respond when they hear about the kind of work we do overseas. They either want details they shouldn't hear, or they get uncomfortable and change the subject. So we were both protecting each other from information we thought the other couldn't handle. Marcus nodded slowly. It seems that way. Maya, the barista, approached their table cautiously. I don't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to ask if everything is okay. We saw all the police activity, and, Sarah, you seem to be involved somehow. Sarah looked up at the young woman who had served her coffee every morning for months. I'm a police detective, Maya. I was working undercover on an investigation. The operation this morning was successful, but I can't discuss the details. Maya's eyes widened with surprise and excitement. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I knew there was something different about you, but I never would have guessed you were a detective. That's so cool. The enthusiastic reaction from Maya highlighted another aspect of Sarah's situation. Her undercover identity had affected more than just her relationship with Marcus. Everyone at the coffee shop, all the regular customers who had accepted her as Sarah the graphic designer, would now have to adjust their perception of who she really was. Will you still be coming here in the mornings? Maya asked. I'm not sure yet. My assignment is finished, so my schedule might change. After Maya returned to her work behind the counter, Marcus and Sarah were left to continue their conversation. The interruption had given them both a moment to process what they had learned about each other. So what happens now? Marcus asked. I don't know, Sarah admitted. I'll probably be assigned to a new case, possibly another undercover operation. This investigation is finished, but there's always another one waiting. And I'll likely be deploying again within the next few months. We're still waiting for final orders, but it looks probable. The practical realities of their professional lives were reasserting themselves. The comfortable routine of morning conversations at the coffee shop had been built on temporary circumstances that were already changing. Would you want to continue being friends? Sarah asked, unsure if she should even suggest it. Now that we know who we actually are? Marcus thought about the question carefully. The revelation of Sarah's true profession had changed his understanding of their relationship, but it hadn't erased the genuine connection he had felt with her. If anything, knowing that she faced professional challenges similar to his own made her more relatable rather than less. I think I would, he said finally. But it would be different. We couldn't go back to the assumptions we had before. Different how? More honest, I suppose. Less editing of our stories to fit what we think the other person wants to hear. Sarah felt a sense of relief at his response. She had been afraid that the revelation of her deception would end their friendship entirely. I'd like that. Though I have to admit, it might take some adjustment for me to talk openly about my actual work. Same here. I've gotten used to keeping operational details separate from personal relationships. Maybe we can figure it out together. Marcus smiled slightly, the first relaxed expression Sarah had seen from him since the morning's events began. Maybe we can. They talked for another hour, carefully exploring the boundaries of what they could share about their real professional lives, while trying to rebuild their personal connection on a foundation of honesty rather than assumption. Both discovered that their friendship had been more resilient than they had expected, able to survive the shock of revelation and adapt to new circumstances. When Marcus finally needed to leave for his base, they exchanged real contact information for the first time. No more relying on chance encounters at the coffee shop to maintain their connection. Will you call me and let me know how your next assignment goes? Marcus asked as he prepared to leave. If I can. Some operations require complete communication blackouts, but, when possible, yes. And you'll be careful? Sarah was struck by the concern in his voice. I will. You too. Deployment operations carry their own risks. As Marcus walked away, Sarah remained at the table, reflecting on how dramatically her morning had changed. She had successfully completed a major investigation, made several significant arrests, and discovered that the friendship she had valued was based on mutual misunderstanding, yet had managed to survive the revelation of truth. Her phone buzzed with a message from her supervisor, requesting her immediate presence at headquarters for debriefing. The morning's operation was far from over in terms of paperwork, evidence processing, and preparing for the legal proceedings that would follow. But, as she gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the coffee shop, Sarah felt optimistic about the possibility that her friendship with Marcus could continue and even improve now that they could be honest with each other about who they really were. The assumption that she was merely a civilian had been shattered, but perhaps something more authentic could take its place. 3 weeks after the revelation at the coffee shop, Sarah found herself sitting across a desk from Lieutenant Williams, her supervisor, receiving details about her next assignment. The drug trafficking case had concluded successfully with multiple convictions, but the department had wasted no time in preparing her for another undercover operation. This one's different, Mitchell, Lieutenant Williams said, sliding a thick file across the desk. We're dealing with a sophisticated identity theft ring that's been targeting military personnel and their families. They're stealing personal information and using it to create fraudulent credit accounts and government benefit claims. Sarah opened the file and began scanning the preliminary reports. The scope of the operation was impressive and disturbing. How long have they been active? At least 2 years, possibly longer. The victims include active duty service members, veterans, and military spouses. The financial damage is significant, but the psychological impact on families who are already dealing with deployment stress has been devastating. As Sarah read through witness statements and victim profiles, she couldn't help thinking about Marcus. His concern about deployment preparations and the stress on military families took on new meaning in the context of this investigation. These criminals were targeting people who were already sacrificing for their country's service. What's my cover identity for this operation? You'll be working as a victim advocate with a nonprofit organization that provides support services to military families. It's legitimate work, and you'll actually be helping people while gathering intelligence on the criminal network. Sarah appreciated the assignment for multiple reasons. Unlike her previous undercover work, this role would allow her to provide genuine assistance to people who needed help. It also meant she could be honest with Marcus about the general nature of her work, even if she couldn't discuss specific operational details. The nonprofit is called Military Family Support Network, Lieutenant Williams continued. You'll be based at their office near Fort Harrison, which puts you close to the military community where most of the targeting has occurred. Fort Harrison, Marcus's base. Sarah realized that her new assignment would bring her into regular contact with the military community where Marcus worked. The possibility of their paths crossing professionally was both intriguing and potentially complicated. When do I start? Monday. You'll undergo a week of training on military family services before beginning your field work. The nonprofit's director is aware of your real identity and mission, but everyone else will know you simply as Sarah Mitchell, victim advocate. That evening, Sarah called Marcus to share what she could about her new assignment. Their friendship had grown stronger since the revelation of their true professions, built on a foundation of honesty that allowed them to discuss the real challenges they faced in their work. Military Family Services? Marcus said when she explained her new role. That's important work. We see the impact of identity theft and financial fraud on our personnel. It causes serious problems with security clearances and readiness. I'll be working near Fort Harrison, actually. There's a chance our paths might cross professionally at some point. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. Would that be a problem for your operation? Sarah appreciated that his first concern was for the success of her mission rather than their personal relationship. I don't think so. My cover identity is legitimate. I really will be helping military families deal with identity theft and financial crimes. If anything, having a contact who understands military culture could be helpful. Just let me know if there's anything I can do to support the mission. This kind of criminal activity affects unit morale and individual well-being in ways that most people don't understand. Their conversation continued for another hour, with Marcus sharing insights about how financial crimes impacted military families and Sarah explaining what she had learned about the scope of the identity theft ring. Both found value in being able to discuss their professional challenges with someone who understood the broader context of their work. The following Monday, Sarah reported to the Military Family Support Network offices for her orientation. The nonprofit occupied a modest building just outside the main gate of Fort Harrison, positioned to be easily accessible to military families while maintaining independence from official military channels. Director Carol Hoffman, a retired Army officer who had founded the organization after her own struggles with military life, greeted Sarah warmly. Detective Mitchell, I'm grateful for your department's willingness to embed an investigator in our operations. This identity theft problem has been devastating for the families we serve. Please call me Sarah. And I want you to know that this isn't just an investigation for me. I'm genuinely committed to helping these families recover from what they've experienced. Over the next several days, Sarah immersed herself in learning about the specific challenges faced by military families. The training covered everything from deployment stress and family separation to the unique financial difficulties created by frequent relocations and irregular pay schedules. She began to understand how criminals had identified military families as particularly vulnerable targets. Military families often have complex financial situations, explained Janet Morrison, the nonprofit's senior counselor. They're dealing with deployment pay, family separation allowances, housing allowances that change with each assignment, and benefit systems that can be confusing even under normal circumstances. When someone steals their identity and creates fraudulent accounts, it can take months or years to sort out the mess. Sarah listened to case studies of families who had discovered that their children's social security numbers had been used to open credit cards, or that someone had claimed their housing allowances through fraudulent military benefit applications. The personal impact went far beyond financial loss. These families already sacrifice so much for military service, Janet continued. When they become victims of financial crimes, it adds another layer of stress to lives that are already complicated by deployments, relocations, and family separations. By the end of her first week, Sarah had gained a deep appreciation for the work the nonprofit was doing and a clearer understanding of how the identity theft ring was operating. The criminals had developed sophisticated methods for obtaining personal information from military personnel and were using that information to exploit government benefit systems as well as private financial institutions. Her first client was Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, whose husband was deployed to Iraq while she cared for their two young children. Jennifer had discovered that someone had used her family's information to file false tax returns claiming fraudulent refunds and had opened multiple credit card accounts in her children's names. I don't understand how this could happen, Jennifer said, clearly overwhelmed by the scope of the fraud. We're so careful with our personal information. David always told me to be cautious about sharing details about his military service or our financial situation. Sarah worked patiently with Jennifer to document all the fraudulent accounts and begin the process of filing disputes with credit agencies and law enforcement. The work was genuinely helpful to the family, while also providing Sarah with valuable intelligence about how the criminals were obtaining and using stolen information. This is going to take months to resolve completely, Sarah explained. But we can start the process immediately and work with your husband's command to ensure this doesn't affect his security clearance or military record. As she helped Jennifer navigate the complex process of identity theft recovery, Sarah gathered details about how the fraud had occurred and when it had been discovered. The information would help her build a profile of the criminal network's methods and timing. Over the following weeks, Sarah worked with dozens of military families who had been targeted by the identity theft ring. Each case provided additional pieces of the investigative puzzle while allowing her to provide genuine assistance to people who desperately needed help. The work was emotionally challenging in ways that her previous undercover assignments had not been. Sarah found herself genuinely invested in the outcomes for her clients, not just the success of her investigation. The military families she was helping reminded her of the values her father had taught her about service and sacrifice. 1 month into her assignment, Sarah was meeting with a client when she received a message that someone from the base wanted to speak with her about a particularly complex identity theft case. The request came through official channels, indicating that her work had gained recognition within the military community. When the appointment time arrived, Sarah was surprised to see Marcus walk into her office. He was wearing his dress uniform rather than the fatigues she had seen him in at the coffee shop, and his bearing was notably more formal than their casual interactions had prepared her for. "Detective Mitchell," he said, offering a crisp salute before extending his hand for a professional handshake. "I'm here representing Staff Sergeant Kim Martinez, one of my team members who has been dealing with identity theft issues that may be connected to your investigation." Sarah found herself momentarily thrown by the formal interaction with someone she had been talking with as a friend just the night before. But she quickly adapted to the professional context. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, please have a seat. I'd be happy to discuss Sergeant Martinez's situation and how our services can help." Marcus sat down across from her desk, maintaining his formal military bearing while briefing her on his team member's case. Sergeant Martinez discovered that someone had filed for veterans' benefits using his personal information, despite the fact that he's still on active duty. The false claims included disability benefits that don't match his actual service record. As Marcus provided details about the fraudulent benefit claims, Sarah realized that this case was more complex than most she had encountered. The criminals had accessed not just personal financial information, but actual military service records and medical files. This suggests a higher level of access to military databases than we've seen in other cases, Sarah said, making notes about the specifics Marcus was providing. "Has Sergeant Martinez identified any possible sources for the information breach?" "That's what we're trying to determine. He's been deployed overseas for the past year, which limits the opportunities for someone to obtain his information through normal social engineering methods." Sarah felt the familiar excitement that came with discovering a significant new lead in an investigation. This case could provide the breakthrough her team needed to identify how the criminal network was accessing military records. "I'll need to interview Sergeant Martinez directly and review all the documentation related to the fraudulent benefit claims. Can you arrange for him to meet with me? He's available this afternoon if that works for your schedule." As they concluded the official business portion of their meeting, Sarah and Marcus found themselves in the strange position of transitioning from professional colleagues back to personal friends. The formal military protocol that had characterized their interaction gave way to the easier familiarity of their ongoing friendship. "This is weird," Sarah said once Marcus had closed his official notepad and relaxed his formal posture. "Good weird, but definitely weird." Marcus smiled, the first relaxed expression he had shown since entering her office. "I wasn't sure how to handle it. Military protocol says one thing, but our friendship suggested something else. I think we handled it well. Professional when we need to be, personal when appropriate. Speaking of personal, are you free for lunch? I know you probably need to prepare for the Martinez interview, but I thought we might grab something quick." Sarah checked her schedule and nodded. "That sounds good. Just give me a few minutes to organize my notes from this morning." As they left her office together, Sarah reflected on how her new assignment was providing unexpected benefits beyond the investigative opportunities. Being able to work openly with Marcus, even in a professional capacity, felt like a natural evolution of their friendship. The days of maintaining separate compartments for their personal and professional lives were behind them. But she also recognized that the success of her investigation would depend on maintaining appropriate boundaries and not allowing their personal relationship to compromise her professional judgment. The identity theft ring she was pursuing had shown sophisticated knowledge of military systems and culture. She would need all her professional skills and perhaps Marcus's military expertise to bring them to justice. 6 weeks into her assignment with the Military Family Support Network, Sarah had developed a comprehensive understanding of the identity theft ring's operations. The interview with Sergeant Martinez had provided the breakthrough her investigation needed, revealing that the criminals had gained access to military personnel databases through a corrupt civilian contractor who worked in the base's administrative offices. Working with Marcus had proven invaluable in ways she hadn't anticipated. His understanding of military protocols and personnel systems helped her navigate the complex bureaucracy required to trace how the information was being accessed and shared. Their professional collaboration had strengthened their personal friendship, built now on mutual respect for each other's expertise rather than assumptions about civilian versus military perspectives. The pattern is becoming clear, Sarah explained to Lieutenant Williams during her weekly briefing. They're targeting military families during deployment cycles when the service member is overseas and the spouse is managing financial affairs alone. The criminals know these families are more vulnerable and less likely to immediately detect fraudulent activity. Lieutenant Williams studied the evidence Sarah had compiled. How close are we to making arrests? Very close. We've identified the primary network, including the civilian contractor who's providing access to military records. Marcus, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, has been working with base security to monitor the contractor's computer access without alerting him to our investigation. Good work, Mitchell. What do you need to complete the operation? Coordinated arrest warrants for 6 individuals, including the contractor and the ring leaders who are operating off base. The timing will be critical because they've shown they can disappear quickly when they suspect law enforcement attention. Sarah left the briefing feeling confident about the impending conclusion of her investigation, but also somewhat melancholy about the end of her assignment with the nonprofit. Working with military families had been more personally rewarding than any previous case in her career. She had genuinely helped people rebuild their financial lives while pursuing justice for the crimes committed against them. That evening, Marcus called with an update on the military side of the operation. Base security has confirmed unusual database access patterns from the contractor. He's been pulling personnel records for service members who are currently deployed, exactly matching the victim profile you identified. Perfect. That gives us the evidence we need to show he's specifically targeting vulnerable families rather than accessing records for legitimate administrative purposes. There's something else, Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious. I received my deployment orders today. We're leaving in 3 weeks. Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions. She had known Marcus would eventually be deployed again, but the reality of his departure was more difficult than she had expected. Their friendship had become an important part of her life, providing a connection to someone who understood the unique challenges of their respective professions. Where are you going? She asked, though she knew he might not be able to share details. Central Asia. It's classified beyond that, but it's likely to be a 9-month deployment. Sarah understood the implications. 9 months of limited communication, dangerous conditions, and the stress that came with overseas operations. How are you feeling about it? Better than I would have 6 months ago, Marcus replied honestly. The work we've done together, both professionally and personally, has helped me feel more grounded about balancing military service with civilian relationships. Meaning I've learned that I don't have to compartmentalize everything completely. Having someone who understands the demands of this kind of work makes it easier to maintain perspective during deployment. Sarah realized that their friendship had been as valuable to Marcus as it had been to her, providing him with the civilian connection he had been seeking when they first met, but in a more authentic way than either had originally imagined. Will you be able to communicate while you're deployed? Limited email and occasional video calls, depending on operational security requirements. It won't be like our daily conversations, but we can stay in touch. 2 days later, the coordinated arrest took place. Sarah worked with local police, federal investigators, and military security to simultaneously apprehend all 6 members of the identity theft ring. The operation went smoothly, with no resistance from the suspects and significant evidence recovered from computers and financial records. The civilian contractor, Robert Chun, had been selling access to military personnel databases for over 2 years, earning nearly $50,000 by providing personal information about service members and their families to the criminal network. His arrest sent shockwaves through the base administration and led to immediate security protocol reviews. The victims we've identified so far represent over $2 million in fraudulent claims and stolen funds, Sarah reported to the assembled law enforcement team after the arrests were completed. But, more importantly, we've helped nearly 100 military families begin the process of recovering their financial security and peace of mind. Marcus attended the final briefing as the military liaison, providing the base perspective on how the arrests would be handled and what changes would be implemented to prevent similar breaches in the future. After the official proceedings concluded, Sarah and Marcus found themselves alone in her office, both reflecting on how much had changed since their first conversation in the coffee shop months earlier. "I never imagined when I met you that we'd end up working together on a major criminal investigation," Sarah said, organizing files from the completed case. "I never imagined that the civilian graphic designer I was talking to would turn out to be a detective who would help protect my fellow service members from financial crimes." Sarah laughed at the reminder of how wrong their initial assumptions had been. "We've come a long way from thinking we understood each other. Have we, though? Or have we just gotten better at being honest about who we actually are?" Sarah considered his question. "Maybe both. I think I understand you better now, but I also think we've both changed through the process of working together." Marcus nodded. "I feel more integrated. Like the military side of my life and the civilian side don't have to be completely separate anymore. And I've learned that my work can be personally meaningful in ways I hadn't experienced before. Helping those military families wasn't just about solving crimes. It was about protecting people who sacrifice for others." They sat quietly for a moment, both aware that Marcus's deployment would soon separate them and uncertain about what their friendship would look like when he returned. "I have something for you," Marcus said, reaching into his uniform pocket and withdrawing a small wrapped package. "Consider it a deployment gift, but also a thank you for everything you've taught me about balancing professional and personal relationships." Sarah unwrapped the gift to find a simple silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a badge. "It's beautiful. Thank you. The badge represents your profession, but also your commitment to protecting others. I wanted you to have something to remember that your work makes a real difference in people's lives." Sarah felt unexpectedly emotional about the thoughtful gift and what it represented about their friendship. "I'll wear it every day, and I'll think about the families we helped every time I see it." "I have something for you too," Sarah said, opening her desk drawer and removing a small wrapped item. "It's not much, but I thought you might appreciate it during deployment." Marcus unwrapped a compact photo frame containing a picture of the coffee shop where they had first met, along with a card that read, "For Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," a reminder that civilian connections are worth maintaining. "Thank you for your service and your friendship, Detective Mitchell." Marcus studied the photo, remembering how different their relationship had been when that location represented the full extent of their interaction. "This is perfect. I'll keep it on my desk wherever they station us." "When you get back from deployment, things will probably be different again," Sarah said. "I'll likely be assigned to new cases, maybe another undercover operation. Your unit might be stationed somewhere else, or you might have new responsibilities." "Probably. But I don't think that changes the foundation of what we've built." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've proven that our friendship can adapt to changing circumstances and new information about who we are. We survived the revelation that we were both completely wrong about each other's profession. We learned to work together professionally while maintaining personal trust. I think we can handle whatever changes come next." Sarah realized that Marcus was right. Their relationship had been tested in ways that most friendships never experience, and it had grown stronger rather than weaker through each challenge. The assumptions that had originally brought them together had been replaced by genuine understanding and mutual respect. "Promise me you'll be careful during deployment," she said. "And stay in touch when you can." "I promise." "And you be careful with whatever investigation comes next. I know you can handle yourself, but I worry anyway." Marcus stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Sarah?" "Yes. I'm glad you turned out to be a detective instead of a graphic designer." Sarah smiled. "I'm glad you turned out to be more than just someone adjusting to civilian life." After Marcus left, Sarah remained in her office, looking at the bracelet he had given her and thinking about the unexpected journey their friendship had taken. From mistaken assumptions to professional collaboration to genuine mutual support, their relationship had evolved in ways neither could have predicted. Her phone rang with a call from Lieutenant Williams. "Mitchell, I have your next assignment. Another undercover operation, this time involving corporate espionage. Are you ready for a new challenge?" Sarah looked around the office where she had spent the past 2 months helping military families recover from identity theft, where she had learned to work openly with Marcus, and where she had discovered that her profession could be personally meaningful in new ways. "Yes, sir. I'm ready." As she gathered her personal items and prepared to transition to her next assignment, Sarah reflected on how much her perspective had changed since that morning months ago when she had first sat down across from Marcus in the coffee shop. She had learned that assumptions could be wrong, but friendships could be resilient, that professional deception sometimes protected important relationships rather than destroying them, and that the most meaningful connections could develop from the most unexpected circumstances. The badge Marcus had seen that morning had initially altered everything he thought he knew about her. But ultimately, it had led them both to a deeper and more authentic understanding of who they really were, both professionally and personally. Sarah touched the charm on her new bracelet and smiled, grateful for a friendship that had survived revelation, adaptation, and now separation, confident that it would continue to evolve and endure whatever challenges lay ahead.